In this presentation, we're going to look at continuous data, and by the end of it, you should be able to identify continuous data and be able to use continuous data in a frequency distribution table. You should also be able to determine the width of the interval, and then you should be able to use Excel to help analyze continuous data. So what is continuous data? First off, continuous data simply depends on the degree of accuracy for the specific range in which the value must lie. Let's say, for example, you are to measure the length of an object. Then if you're measuring that object to the nearest centimeter, this will be considered as continuous data, since we are not interested in values beyond that centimeter. Say, for example, we have to measure 35 centimeters, and when we measure that 35 centimeters, if it has a 0.4 centimeter at the end of it, we are not concerned with that because we are looking for the nearest centimeter. So when you think about this, you would realize that most instruments, such as stopwatches and balances, provide continuous data, since below a certain unit value, they are not able to give you a value. And that may sound redundant. Let's say, for example, you have a stopwatch that gives you up to milliseconds. You can't get nanoseconds from that stopwatch. If, for instance, you have a scale or a balance, that measures units of kilogram, you can't get anything such as 500 grams from it. You can approximate it, but you can't get the value. So now that you understand what continuous data is, we can use continuous data and create frequency distribution tables to be able to understand and analyze the information better. To do this, however, would require us to break up the data into classes or intervals, but the data is lost once you do this, and you would see why later on. Let's say, for example, you have a quantity and a particular unit to go along with it. You can state it in one of three ways, and these are the three ways here. Now remember, a frequency distribution table has two columns, one for the frequency and one for the quantity. So this quantity column here is the one that we're talking about when we look at these three columns. Now each one of the columns can have ranges running like this. It could be 29. Let's say, for instance, we're looking at 30 to 35 as the range. Then if you want to state it in this format, you would use 29.5 and you would use 30.5. Since you want the values to be greater than or equal to 29.5, these values here are still recognized as 30 when you round them up. Notice that this value of 35.5 here is considered to still be 35 for anything less than that value. And the other way you can state it is just simply by taking these two values and putting it with a hyphen in between. This is supposed to be a hyphen, but just not to make it look like a negative sign, I put 3 dots instead. And I use the symbol here for round, which is definitely not the symbol for round, but you will understand that what I try to do is I round this 29.5 down, to 30, and then I round this 35.5 down to the value that it's supposed to be, which is 35. Now notice that 1, 2, 3 different methods of stating the exact same thing for a range of 30 to 35. This value here is what we will be using when we deal with Excel and try to find particular values. Now these quantities here, these values are usually called class boundaries, and there is a lower class boundary, which is in this case 29.5, and there's an upper class boundary in this case, which is 35.5. These are what we will use, this upper class boundary and this lower class boundary is what we will use to actually determine the class interval, the width of the interval. So to find the width of an interval, we just simply find the difference between the two boundaries, and we have to remember that each one of the intervals must have the same size. So I can go from 10 to 20 and then from 20 to 30, and that would be fine. But I cannot go from 10 to 20 and then decide to go from 20 to 25. Notice that each one of them don't have the same class width. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to show you how you would use Excel to analyze continuous data. On this site, I will be using random.org to generate 100 integer values between 100 and 180. So I set the values and I press get numbers, and I get 100 values. I'm going to take these 100 values, copy it, and then I'm going to paste it into an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to paste it as text so that it goes into each one of the cells. Next, I am going to start my frequency distribution table, and the first heading, as I said, I will use height, and I'm not going to bother with the units since I'm just showing you how to do this. And then we have frequency, and then from there I'm going to just simply format it as a table, and I'm going to use this format here. I have my own table headers, so I check this box, and I'm going to run values in widths, class widths of 10. Class and intervals have the same meaning in this case. Next, I am going to fix the criteria for each of these. Alright, so now that I have these values with the criteria in place, all I have to do now is simply click in this box. Now that we have all of this set up, we click in the box here, we go to the statistical function, which is this, and we're looking for count ifs. Go to OK. Now the first criteria range is this here, and we make sure and absolute reference these by clicking in the middle and pressing F4. And the criteria is this lower class boundary here. We have the same range for the second criteria, so make sure and click here, absolute reference. And then we go to this criteria here, and we click OK. Now we just do a sum to make sure that it's done correctly. And we get 100. Now I can just simply take this information here and create any kind of table that I wish. So in this case, I can create a bar chart, and it will look as I need it. Let's create one that looks more familiar. Let's say, for instance, you have this one here. You can create this one. Frequency distribution for this information. Alright. So, if you have any questions or comments, you can just simply reference the textbook, or you can simply send me a message and I will answer any questions that you have. Thank you.